Alright, good morning everybody. It's your boy Akeem. Welcome to today's second blog. Here to continue things with my draft grades for the 2015 NFL Draft. For this blog, I'm here to head over to the NFC East division and talk about their team selections and their overall grades. First team I want to talk about is the Dallas Cowboys. I think they had a solid draft, especially with their first two selections, and the second round pick was a huge steal. With their first pick at pick number 27, they went with the cornerback who I actually predicted correctly, and Byron Jones coming out of UConn. Now, because of his leaping ability as well as his cover skills, the Dallas Cowboys definitely had to select him to replace Morris Claiborne, who has been a complete bust for Dallas. The next pick in the second round was Randy Gregory out of Nebraska. This was a huge steal because I honestly believe that he's a top 5 talent, and I actually had him going at number 2 overall to the Tennessee Titans with my predictions. And I think this is going to be a huge steal, one of the biggest steals in this year's NFL draft. With the third round, they actually did have a little bit of a reach in this one, and offensive tackle Chaz Green out of Florida. He's still a decent player, and he definitely added more depth in the lineman core for the Dallas Cowboys. They actually have one of the best offensive line in the National Football League. In the fourth round, they picked up Damian Wilson, the inside linebacker coming out of Minnesota. And I think he will be a great addition for the linebacking core for the boys. And because of him having over 100 tackles, I think he could work well alongside Rolando McClain, who actually reclaimed his career with 81 tackles this past season. And let's not forget about Sean Lee. He did have 99 tackles for the Cowboys defense. And in the fifth round, they had an interesting pickup from Purdue, Ryan Russell. He definitely had good numbers at 6'4", 269 pounds, and he does run a 4.75 40. Now, he doesn't really have too much productivity as far as getting behind the line of scrimmage, but he definitely can help out and run support for the Dallas Cowboys defense. He should be able to make the team. With the next pick in the 7th round, Mark Ziacha out of Wyoming, the outside linebacker, he didn't really have too much of a productive career for those Cowboys. I don't really think he's going to make the 53-man roster, but we will see. In the 7th round, they had Lawrence Gibson, offensive tackle, and then with their final selection, they had Jeff Swain, one of my Texas Longhorns, at the tight end position. And that is one position that they're looking to fulfill to replace Jason Witten. He had a great lustrous career for the Dallas Cowboys. But Swain is actually used more in blocking situations. He's not really as a great pass-catching tight end. Hopefully he can make the 53-man roster. If not, he should make the practice squad for Dallas. Now, overall, I actually have to give Dallas a solid B. I think they had a pretty good draft this past season. Now, the next team we need to talk about is the Philadelphia Eagles. They had an okay draft as well. A couple of areas where they should have addressed was the secondary, wide receiver, and outside linebacker, and they did that with their first 3 selections. With the first round pick at pick number 20, they went with another Pac-12 player and Nelson Aguilar out of USC, an excellent pickup to replace Jeremy Maclin. In the second round, another Pac-12 player, Eric Rowe, the cornerback coming out of Utah. I think he could start right away for the Philadelphia Eagles because they definitely need some help in the secondary. In the third round, that's when it went with outside linebacker and my Longhorn Jordan Hicks. Now, he did have over 100 plus tackles this past season, as well as 10 plus tackles for loss this past year. I think he could possibly start right away, but he's going to have to fight things over in the linebacking core. In the fourth round, they picked up in the sixth round, they picked up 2 pretty sleepers at cornerback with Ja'Cory Shepherd out of Kansas and Randall Evans out of Kansas State. Well, both these 2 players combined, they actually combined with 50 pass breakups over the course of the last 2 seasons. Actually 22 for Evans as well as 28 for Shepherd for their respective schools over the last 2 years. That definitely shows they have good cover skills, and they should be able to make the team, I believe, at least one of them, and possibly start in different defensive schemes for the Eagles defense. And lastly, with their final pick, they had Brian Mihalik out of Boston College, the defensive end. I don't really see him making the 53-man roster, but they still have to pick up players in the 7th round, and hopefully they can find a gem in him, but I don't really see him making the 53-man roster. Now, because of those first 5 selections from rounds 1 through 6, I actually have to give them a B+. I really like their efforts and their selections. They did a pretty good job. I have to give kudos to Chip Kelly and his selections. Next team I need to talk about is the New York Giants. They had an okay draft. I kind of like their selections as well. With their first pick, they had Eric Flowers out of the offensive tackle out of the U. Now, this was an interesting selection. At first, I started praising him a little bit more entering this year's draft, coming just prior of the draft, a couple of days. I started to like his clips, and I started to see a little bit more of his highlights and starting believing in him as a top 10 talent for the G-men. But then when I actually saw his video at home, I was a little bit concerned. I kind of hope he's not a knucklehead like a lot of other players coming out of Miami. Hopefully he can get things together and become a good tackle to protect Eli Manning. With their 2nd round pick and 1st overall in the 2nd round, they actually had to bump up and traded up to get Landon Collins, the #1 safety entering this year's draft out of Alabama. Now, I actually had Collins going to Pittsburgh at pick number 22 of the 1st round, but I think this was an excellent choice for the G-men to actually move up and pick the top safety entering this year's draft. In the 3rd round, they picked up Iowa Odigizua out of UCLA. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. The defensive end. Now, he definitely has freakish size, and I think he could become a good freakish defensive end and a good pass rusher opposite of Jason Pierre-Paul. Now, he didn't post up big numbers, but same as Jason Pierre-Paul during his time at South Florida. But I still think that both of these two players can wreak havoc in that line of scrimmage. And Pierre-Paul did have 12.5 sacks this past season. Next up in the 5th round, they picked up Mikel Thompson, my safety coming from Texas Longhorns. I was a little bit shocked with this selection at safety, even though they picked up Landon Collins. I think they should have addressed a different position, and because they picked up Landon Collins, but I think they could have possibly went with a cornerback in the 5th round. I disagree with this selection, even though he did go to Texas. Now, in the next 6th round, they picked up Jeremy Davis, the wide receiver. He's 6'3", 216 pounds, and I think this was a decent pickup from UConn, and I think this is an interesting pickup because of his size. I think he definitely brings up more size and depth to the wide receivers. Hopefully he can make the team. And with their final pick from Florida State, Bobby Hart. Now, he's going to have to fight his butt off to make the 53-man roster, but anything can happen. Now, overall for their grade, I actually have to give them a B-. I think the Landon Collins and the Eric Flowers was a good pick as far as Iowa out of UCLA, but the next 3 selections was a little bit of a question mark. But with Jeremy Davis possibly is a good, decent player, but I have to give them a B- overall. Now, lastly, I have to talk about the Washington Redskins, and I must say I like their draft picks the most out of all the teams. First off, with their first pick at 5th overall, they had Brandon Scherf, the offensive tackle coming out of Iowa. I think this is a great selection. They was actually hoping for Dante Fowler out of Florida for this selection, but he was actually taken by the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I think this was a great replacement to help out to address the offensive line and add more protection for RG3. With the 2nd round pick, they had a pretty good pass rusher out of Mississippi State, Preston Smith, who was actually all SEC selection this past season with 15 tackles for loss as well as 9 sacks. In the 3rd round, they actually had a head scratcher in my opinion. I think they should have went with a cornerback or addressed possibly the safety position maybe, but they went with a running back in Matt Jones out of Florida. Now, he definitely has been split in time with a lot of other running backs for the Florida Gators, and I think they could have went with other running backs like a JG out of Boise State, as well as a couple of others. I don't really actually had a projected that high to go in the 3rd round, but he is 6'2", 231 pounds. This is a big man, and I think that's probably why the Washington Redskins decided to pick him up, especially in short yardage situations. And he actually is a little bit of a replicate of Alfred Morris, who has rushed for 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. In the 4th round, they picked up Jamison Crowder, the wide receiver coming out of Duke. I think this was an excellent pickup. He had a productive career, a great career as a Blue Devil, and he definitely broke a lot of records, not only in the ACC, but also in his school history. He was actually one of the most prolific wide receivers in ACC history, bottom line. And second in the 4th round, they picked up Ari Quadro out of Alabama, coming back to his home state in Maryland, and I think this was a decent pickup, and I think with right coaching, he could become a great offensive tackle in the National Football League. In the 5th round, they picked up a good linebacker out of Arkansas, Martrell Spat. He actually had 128 tackles this past season. And in the 6th round, they actually had a couple of good selections. They went with a safety with Keshawn Jarrett out of Virginia Tech. I think he's another good secondary player coming out of for the Hokies. And I think with Frank Beaver been tutoring over the past couple of seasons, I think he could start for the Washington Redskins. Next up at outside linebacker from Arkansas, another Arkansas player in Tevin Mitchell, working along with another year with Martell Spate. And in the 6th round, they picked up Evan Spencer. I think this was a wasted pick for wide receiver out of Ohio State. He did not actually do too well as far as productivity for the Buckeyes, so I think he would possibly make the 53-man roster at best in the special teams unit. And in the 7th round, in their final pick, Austin Ryder out of South Florida, offensive tackle. He's going to have to fight his way off as well to make the team, but hopefully he will. If not, he will be a practice squad player for the Washington Redskins, or he could join another team. Now, overall for the Redskins, with all their selections, I have to give them a B+. I really like their selections. They did a pretty good job, especially with the positions that they did have, making a couple of trades and picking up more selections. I think they had a good job overall for this year's draft. Now that wraps things up for today. The next time I'm going to catch you guys will be on Thursday, where I will wrap things up with the NFC South and the NFC North Division. I'll see you guys then. Thank you for watching today's vlogs. I'm your man, Akeem McCall. Be easy.